Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Brother Hamza Foy of the Louisville Muhsineen. I have an interesting recording today going over some basic knowledge regarding fishing, both rod and reel and fishing tackle. This recording is intended to be a reference both for Muhsineen members who, in our upcoming camping trip or in the future, they want to understand some basics regarding fishing, or for any father, any son who is looking to take a fishing trip. So I'm going to go over some basics related to both fishing pole and reel first, and then I'll get into some of the accessories that we have laid out on the table. So first and foremost, what I'm going to showcase briefly is the fishing rod and reel. So whether you go shopping at Walmart, Target, Myers, or sort of a higher end store like Cabela's, you're always going to see fishing rods for adults. I'm not going to talk about the kids, those fishing poles that are intended for kids. I'm going to talk about adults. You're typically going to have one of two types of reel, which the reel I am referring to is this device that is attached to the fishing pole. One of two devices, one of two types of reels. This one in the video that you see is what is called a Baitcaster. You may see a second form in which the spool, so the spool is where the fishing line is going to wrap around inside of this device. The second type of reel, the spool is actually going to be vertical. Like if you're looking at it, it's going to be vertical. This one is horizontal. The second type is vertical. Some manufacturers, they will pre-roll fishing line on the reel. However, some other manufacturers, they will just produce and sell the fishing rod with the reel attached, no line on the spool. So the spool is going to be that round cylinder that the line is intended to wrap around. This specifically is an Abu Garcia Baitcaster. When I ordered it, it came without line on the spool. So you may ask, kind of the first obstacle to overcome when assembling your fishing rod is, how do I get that fishing line on the spool? So what I want you to pay attention to, and I'm showcasing Baitcasters which typically are the more common of the two types of reels. What you're going to do is you'll buy yourself some fishing line. It comes on its own plastic spool. Typically when you buy it, you see these notches, these indentations. Usually the end of the line is going to be kind of set into one of those notches. So you just pull it free. You'll be able to get the line off of the spool. What you're going to do is you're going to feed your line through this sort of round piece here. You're going to feed the line towards your spool Now, if your spool is a solid cylinder, then as you feed the line towards the spool, threading it through this circle here that I'm pointing at, you're feeding the line towards the spool. Very simply, you're going to wrap the line around the spool and then tie it off with a knot. Now, let's say, for example, you've got, big hands. It's hard to kind of reach in there. You can draw both ends of the line that you're trying to tie. You can pull it out, tie the knot, and then cinch it against the spool. That works perfectly fine. Once you tie that initial knot, so the line, the fishing line, has now been tied around the spool, the cylinder. If you have any extra line that's like past the knot, you can use any sort of sharp knife or even something as simple as a nail clipper. You're going to snip off that access line. And then from there, very simply, you're going to then start to reel the line, the fishing line, off of the plastic spool onto the spool of your fishing rod. If you have a second person with you, makes it a bit easier reeling that line on, because one person can hold the spool and just, they'll let the line come off, and then the second person is going to be reeling. Now, as you feed the line onto the spool of your fishing reel, you will want to kind of apply a little bit of tension and just have the line feed through your pinched forefinger and thumb. And that will just ensure that the line, the fishing line that's being fed on the spool as you reel, is taut, right? Not loose. There's no slack. It's going to be taut. And it's very simple from there. You just reel on the fishing line onto the spool of your fishing reel attached to your fishing rod. And then let me see if I can do this gingerly. Just trying to bring this within camera focus. You can see, so I fed the fishing line onto the spool and then took the fishing line, threaded it through these metallic holes that you see, and then I've tied, just any fishing lure will do. I've tied that onto the end of the line, and then I kind of use the lure. I just hook it to one of the eyes on the fishing rod, just to keep the line in place. All right, so that is, in simplest terms, how to feed fishing line onto a new rod and reel. That tends to be kind of the first obstacle that people encounter when buying a fishing pole, how to set it up, and so on. Now, presumably, you've bought, a new fishing rod and reel. You got that set up. You realize, I need to buy some basic accessories that I then attach on the fishing line that has successfully been put on my fishing rod and reel. You probably buy, what's called a tackle box, maybe some kind of beginner kits. You open the beginner kits and you go, what is all this? Now, some of the things you can kind of intuit. So, fishing hook. Makes sense. You know what that's for, right? That's to hook the fish and basically reel it out of the water. All right, so we know what hooks are. Then we start to see these things. Weights. Weights are not always necessary, but very basic kind of concept. You've got bobbers and you've got weights. The weights, as you can kind of imply by the word in English, that's going to weigh down whatever bait or lure you have on your line, so it makes it drop in the water. Bobbers give both buoyancy, so it counteracts weight, whereas weight wants to weigh something down. Bobbers, not perfectly, but they will provide kind of a counterweight. Bobbers are also commonly used with certain baits as sort of a indication for you that potentially you may have a bite on your hook, right? So the bobber wants to float on the water and then goes underwater for a second or two and then bobs back up. Gives an indication that, hey, I may have something hooked. There's a couple of other accessories, though, that I do want to walk through. Now, in general, there are a couple of ways that you can tie your fishing line onto your hook or your bait. I want to explain a couple of terms before I get into that. You hear the word tackle? It does not mean like the verb, like to tackle someone like in football or wrestling. Tackle is basically all of your accessories. It's just an umbrella term. Lure is usually a physical and more often than not refers to something that's not living, so it's not live bait, whereas bait refers to something that's living that you're using to attract fish, worms, crickets, so on. Now, you got your fishing line. You want to know, should I be tying my fishing line directly on the lure, or should I be using something like this? I'm going to let it zoom in a little. All right, so this essentially is both a clip with a swivel. Now, when you are fishing with some kind of lure, this is an example. This is, you can call it an inline spinner bait or a spoon bait. When you're fishing with a lure that's going to introduce twisting on your line, you will want to use a swivel clip. Why? Because the swivel clip will prevent that lure from twisting your line, which over time will cause problems with your reel. Use that swivel clip for any sort of bait that's going to introduce twisting in the line. I personally, growing up, I had the best opportunities fishing with what's called spinner bait. This particular spinner bait, you tie the line directly there. The spinning piece is this, which is already on a swivel. So this itself does not like twist in the water as you reel. It's just going to be this thing that spins. Everything else stays relatively static. So a spinnerbait like this, you can tie directly to the line, or if you want to clip it, they do sell just like regular clips without the swivels. The clips by itself without the swivel just makes it to where you can switch bait faster rather than, oh, I need to, take out my knife and cut my line and tie it all. You can just clip, unclip, clip, however many baits or lures you want to clip on. Now, some other types of lures include what is called crankbait. Crankbait are fashioned to look very realistic. That is part of kind of the attraction factor that will draw the attention of the fish. And the way you reel these in, you try to incorporate movement. Once again, just adding an additional attractiveness to the lure, attracting fish to bite. You'll have some of these baits, once again, not only do they look lifelike, the design of them is actually intended to imitate the movement of whatever that bait is. So this is a frog. So as you reel, the legs extend. As you rest, the legs will retract. Some lures, some baits are going to be more advantageous than others based on where you're fishing them, the types of movements that you kind of imitate as you reel. So this, for example, this kind of lure is very effective on lily pads, on algae blooms. And the way you reel it in, you cast and you reel it in, couple seconds moving, couple seconds pause, couple seconds moving, couple seconds pause. Imitating the movement, the environment that you're casting this out makes this very, very attractive for fish like bass in certain settings. Last thing that I'll kind of discuss is plastics, the plastic baits. This sort of way of rigging. So rigging is another verb. When it comes to fishing specifically, rigging is how you are inserting the hook into the bait or lure. This is what's known as a Texas rig. You notice the hook is not like sticking out prominently in a Texas rig. And what that does is it enables you to run this bait through, say, under the water. You've got a lot of, plant life, a lot of debris. The hook, because it's buried a little bit, that enables this to run through the debris at the bottom of like a lake or a pond or a creek without getting snagged. It at least reduces the possibility that the hook snags into, say, like a large tree branch or a tree, stump that's at the bottom. Very effective rigging style, especially when using plastics, because plastic lures, you'll want to be very patient with them. This is not something that you cast out and then you reel back in quickly. Don't do that with plastics, because oftentimes these plastic lures, and let me actually take another one out, a different type, just to demonstrate. These plastic lures, they're shaped like freshwater creatures that fish will want to they'll want to go after. So these, a lot of patience goes into fishing with these. They are effective. Keep in mind that Texas rigging. Keep in mind you're not supposed to just cast and reel them in. Some baits, like spinner baits, these are intended that you cast them out and then you reel them in. Once again, you don't have to do it super quick, but you're reeling it in because that motion of pulling the bait back towards you is what causes these to reflect. And you can actually see the reflection of the light off of these. Hopefully this has been informational, inshallah ta'ala. I don't want to do like a whole hour long, and neither am I an expert by any means, but I do want to lay some groundwork, some basic knowledge that then we can kind of build upon as we do more of these camping trips. Inshallah, this has been beneficial. For Louisville Muhsineen members, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, whether specifically about the camping trip or fishing in general. Whatever I'm able to answer, glad to do so. Whatever I'm not able to answer, I'm happy to find better resources than myself. Once again, barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum.